Thank you very much. And now, Secretary Moniz, the floor and the mic is yours.
Well, thank you. It's working, yes. Well, first, thanks to the Atlantic Council, of course, for hosting this, but also thanks to David and, of course, John Kerry. I do think we have seen a historic moment. I believe the word fusion was pronounced from a stage at COP for the first time in these 28 years. So, and I think that this COP, I must say, I believe has shown a pragmatism that is notable. And I think one of the reflections of that is that we are discussing a much broader range of the technology options, for example, and certainly this panel discussing fusion fits into that category. John Kerry, I hadn't expected it, but he did mention that we kind of lived together for a long time in 2015 with the Iran negotiation. But what he didn't say is that was the same year that we also worked very closely together on the road to COP28 in Paris. And I think I can safely say that neither one of us envisioned that, we would see a decade of such innovation and such progress in fusion that would lead us to a COP28 stage to discuss fusion. He mentioned in my own case, I was frankly, what he said was quite accurate. I was personally a skeptic, and then I visited a company, TAE Technology, and was blown away, frankly, at the progress that we've seen. Then I was blown away when I saw a 20 Tesla magnet at MIT with Commonwealth, et cetera. And I think it's a very important datum that not well recognized broadly, that we have seen the order of $5 billion of private capital going into fusion, in addition to public capital in many countries around the world. But I think the $5 billion of private capital, to me, says somebody must think this has got a good chance of working. And I think that's what's really brought us all together here. So I think it's a terrific time to have this discussion. I hope that what will be conveyed is a sense of there is real optimism. There's not a guarantee yet, but there is real optimism that we may see, and I will be the first to make the prediction that in this decade, there is a very high probability that certainly the conditions for sustained fusion will be demonstrated in the remainder of this decade. Then moving on, of course, towards hopefully a scaling. And make no mistake about it, you will hear about it, I think, from our panelists. But with success, this is truly a game changer assuming this all comes to pass. So that's the context for this discussion. No pressure on the panelists, and I'd like to turn to this outstanding panel. I'll say just a word about them as I call upon each. I'm going to start with Bob Mumgard here to my right. Bob is the CEO of Commonwealth Fusion Energy Systems, one of the privately funded companies. He's also on the board of the Fusion Association. And with that, Bob, why don't you say a few words about your take on kind of the status of the fusion, not just in the United States, but in fact globally?
Yeah, so we've known that fusion is sort of the holy grail for energy for a really long time, basically 100 years. The very first time we realized how the stars worked, we realized, that reaction, if we could actually use that reaction on Earth, it would really change the game. I mean, it's a reaction that's unlimited. It's a reaction that actually built every piece of us, like every atom is done in a fusion reaction. If we could do that on Earth, it would be not just an industry, it would be a transformation. And so we've been working on it for a very long time. And the science has gone a long way. It's actually gone faster than Moore's law in the sort of figures of merit that are about making that reaction happen. And, it sort of got talked about in the oil crisis, and that led to a big step forward, and then it kept going, and people sort of turned away from thinking about it, talking about it, but in the background, all of these scientists were working on it. And then all of a sudden, all these technologies started to be applied to it, things like AI and materials, and it got better and better and better, and just in the last 5 years, we saw that we have, created the right conditions at a laser and NIF. We have multiple ways, multiple shots on goal in these companies and these other labs, and we have a really strong framework, particularly in the U.S., U.K., and Japan, and other countries, about how to advance this past into a commercialization. So, if you were to look at this, it actually has a bunch of it's reminiscent of other times that science has gone through this jump from the lab to commercial. It's reminiscent of the early biotech, where you're starting to see real proof points in science and technology, government action, roadmaps, private capital, companies, all at the same time. Except it's benefiting from the fact that, unlike, say, the biotech revolution, we have like 50 years of other technologies that are accelerating innovation. And those are all on top of this. So it's just going faster and faster. And in the last 5 years, it's unrecognizable.
Oh, I thought you were going to say more, but that's okay. That's a good start. I actually do want to re-emphasize one of the things Bob mentioned, and that is that the integration now of these broad technology developments like AI and machine learning and other technologies, high performance computing and the like, really are transforming a lot of science. But certainly in the fusion arena, it's having an enormous impact in accelerating the experimental programs that we all think are, at least have a very high probability of leading to success. I just realized also, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, Bob basically said it, but so fusion again, as opposed to nuclear fission, where one is splitting a very heavy atom, uranium, let's say, one is in fact here just going to the opposite end of the periodic table, bringing together two light elements and with enormous energy release. And just to be clear, one of the reasons why we're talking about this as a game changer is because it will provide the kind of constant or base load, clean energy, clean electricity that we need without some of the challenges that one has when one splits the heavy stuff. So that's really the background here. Let me turn to Kostas Samaras. Kostas from the White House, the Office of Science and Technology Policy. He was a co-host of last year's rather novel White House Fusion Energy Summit or something like that. And Kostas, maybe you can, the governments in the United States, but also many other governments around the world showing great interest now in pushing this technology forward rapidly. Perhaps you can comment on the announcement we just heard and the decadal vision that, of course, came out of last year's summit.
Well, thanks very much. It's an honor to be here with everyone. As we've heard, fusion has benefited from more than 6 decades of federal R&D, including many decades at the Department of Energy and its predecessor organizations. And there's been international collaboration throughout that entire period. But we're really entering a new era now. As Mr. Secretary mentioned, last year we had the first ever White House Summit on Fusion Energy, and the President launched a bold decadal vision, and that includes advanced R&D, it includes milestone programs for public-private partnerships, and new R&D opportunities with the private sector and international collaborators. Now, the challenge here is energy technologies have long taken decades to get from the starting place to the market, and we do not have decades. And international collaboration is one way to kickstart and supercharge the opportunities in fusion energy that we're seeing in the private sector and really accelerate the pathway between now and a commercial fusion power plant. And so we heard that the new international partnership announced today includes R&D, includes supply chain, it includes workforce, it includes public education. And really, it is about doing all those things at the same time. So just like a computer will take different tasks and break them up and do them on different chips, we call it parallel processing. We can't do all of those things independently and wait to build up a global supply chain and wait to build up a diverse workforce and wait to build out the type of marketplace and finance. We have to do them all at the same time. And that's really what this international partnership and the President's bold decadal vision is all about, accelerating the promise of fusion energy for all in a way that brings this amazing technology to the marketplace and leaves nobody behind.
Kaza, can you just elaborate a little bit on some of the specific elements of the vision and how the government is looking to work with the private sector?
You know, as you mentioned, there's more than $6 billion
It keeps clicking up. Right?
Yeah, in private sector investment in here. This is about using the milestone-based public-private partnerships, doing shared test facilities. So instead of having each place build their own facility, we can do shared test facilities, collaborate, and share knowledge across borders and boundaries so that we can understand at this really important juncture where we're rapidly advancing, and I think the biotech example, Bob, is a perfect example, is that we don't know how fast this can go. All we know is that we want to be ready with understanding materials in harsh environments, understanding how we can get and sustain a burning plasma, understand how, once we get that burning plasma, how to turn it into electricity or heat and be able to power all of the world's energy demands in a way that has zero emissions. And so this public-private partnership, this international collaboration really starts to build out all of these individual elements by digging into the science that enables the advancement of a fusion power plant along the timeline that we need to deal with climate change.
Thank you. And I would just add, along the lines of public-private partnership, for example, in the United States, the Department of Energy and its laboratories have already made available, for example, large amounts of high-performance computing to these private companies, which is very helpful. The high-tech sector has already applied things like machine learning approaches to advance the experiments. We just heard a few days ago about AI having a big breakthrough in terms of new materials. So this is very important. And speaking of the high-tech sector, we're going to turn to Michelle Patron from Microsoft. Microsoft is obviously one of those gobbler of green electrons. They want as many as they can find. So perhaps you could talk about what a company like Microsoft sees in the fusion developments and why it's so important.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you all today. At Microsoft, we have a vision for the world's grids that 100% of the electricity, 100% of the time, comes from zero carbon sources. And we have an important role to play. We are a large clean energy purchaser. In fact, we have purchased or we've contracted for 19 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity since 2013, and that's equivalent to about 10 Hoover dams. We are an investor. In 2020, when we announced our carbon negative goal, we also announced a $1 billion climate innovation fund, and we have deployed about $700 million of that in 50 investments in carbon-free and grid technologies, including in carbon-free and grid technologies. And we're also a digital service provider to customers across the power sector. So based on that, I have 3 observations. One is that in order to meet growing electricity demand and to do it in a full decarbonization way, we need a multi-technology approach. We need to continue to invest. The world needs to continue to invest in solar and wind and storage and geothermal, but also needs to include these advanced carbon-free technologies like fusion. The second is that while we are talking about global issues and electricity is global, grids are also local. And so the mix will really depend on local politics and local economic and local social considerations. And the third observation is how important it is to couple procurement with strong policy action. And that's really what has gotten us to scale in renewable energy. We've seen it now happening in sustainable aviation fuels. And so that's kind of the theory of change. So earlier this year, Microsoft announced that we had a power purchasing agreement with Helion, another startup alongside Commonwealth, to send that market signal that for 50 megawatts of electricity coming from a site in Washington State, that if once this technology comes online, there are corporate buyers that want to purchase it. And as well, to help continue to take this down the cost curve and to continue go towards commercialization. Earlier today, Microsoft released a policy brief in which we're outlining kind of priorities that will inform our advocacy around fusion, policies related to development in order to get it from the lab to the market, policies related to deployment to help those first-of-a-kind projects to get built, and policies that are related to regulatory oversight, because it's a different technology and we need to establish a different type of regulatory framework that is both robust but also efficient, and that also, since this is a global technology and is going to be globally deployed, is consistent in countries around the world. And so we're just really, this is because of the progress that we've seen with startups like Commonwealth and Helion and the national labs, and that these are technologies that do have unique regulatory considerations. So having conversations like this is what the goal of the paper is meant to do.
We've talked about how AI, for example, can help advance fusion, but AI will also be a big consumer of these green electrons. Can you give us a sense of what's the kind of growth rate just for like one big company like Microsoft in terms of power needs?
So I'd frame it that there's two pieces to it. We talked a lot about that the AI has really the potential to really drive these huge solutions in some of these really complex energy systems, as well in creating new materials. And on the flip side is that we need to align AI with sustainability outcomes. And so we need to invest in the efficiency in the infrastructure and in the compute, and continue to advance carbon-free electricity, and continue to reduce the emissions of the supply chain that goes into the compute infrastructure.
We're going to turn now to Gabriela Hearst and have I think, a somewhat different perspective here. Gabriela, last I checked, even though she's going to MIT a lot, is not yet a fusion scientist. She is a prominent fashion designer and major advocate for fusion. And so it'd be great if you could say a few words about kind of your journey to this point and how you see fusion fitting into your vision of the future.
Okay, well, it's been my journey on sustainability.
Oops, I think
There?
it's not working.
Hello? There? There.
Oh, there we go.
It's Gabriela Hearst. My company was founded with long-term view and sustainability. I come from a ranch. I'm seventh generation rancher in South America, so it's really long-term view. And through the journey in my industry in fashion, on how to create with less impact, from the materials we're using to packaging, biodegradable, carbo hangers, you name it, measuring carbon footprints, on and on and on, really taking it to blockchaining every single garment that we had. And one time in October 21st, I'll never forget the date, I read an article on fusion on Financial Times, and it was on the private sector and the public sector. And all of a sudden, something in my brain went, whoa, this is it. And I started researching it. I made it a part of my show for Chloe. And then I realized very early on, which if we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about energy. And we really need to focus on the moving away from the fossil fuel addiction that we have. This needs to move rapidly. And it was pretty clear that the demand, I think it's 85% of this world moves 85% on fossil fuels. And while we have great intermittent energies like wind power and solar, we need these other energies that can come and take the volume, which hydrogen, fission, and the potential of fusion. I have nothing against nuclear. I realize they just have a PR problem. But fusion had a communication issue. So I did a show in Paris talking to the fashion community. At the beginning, people were like, what is it, fusion food? What the? And it was really, breaking, really starting to tell people stories that are something to hold on to hope, right? Because this is potentially good news. And we got an article in Vanity Fair, which, it's out of a science journal, and it has become my holy grail. If I'm going to put all my energy into sustainability, besides the practice of my business, is that we are trying to create a business model that is successful based on these principles, but the bigger core of my mission is that. And I think that I have a unique position because I am not a scientist, I am not a politician, and I am not an investor. I am a woman, a mother, a creator that really believes that this is what can actually, one of the solutions that could really, really help the survival of our species. And so when I see hopes in the teams of Commonwealth, I met a lot of I visited Commonwealth, Helium, I went to ITER. This is actually a blueprint of ITER. And so I really feel that there's hope here, and I've seen the progress that just happened in 2 years, from people not knowing what we're talking about to, it's getting more excited. My best friend now calls me the Oracle of Paysandú because I come from Paysandú, Uruguay. But it's really the hope that I see in the community that I just invited myself to this party. Because I'll be like the cheerleader that you need when you have to get to that race and be like, you need to do this, guys, we need you. But I agree that the thinking has to be progressing. We do not have the time to the deployment that happened from the commercialization of solar panel and wind to that transition time, those decades that it took. We need to speed up. So this idea of thinking forward, and I also agree that the advancements of AI can really help with the experiments of plasma physics that we all know they're the hardest one. So you can call me the official cheerleader of fusion.
Okay.
Or party crasher.
You are so deemed. And let me also extend to you in real time here an invitation to visit TAE as well. So you can see yet another technology.
Exactly.
You mentioned Chloe in passing, which I believe is your most recent, perhaps, fashion line. Do you want to say a few words as to how your fusion views might have influenced your work?
It was a challenging time. It was because the war in Ukraine just happened, and there was the energy crisis happening, and I had the fusion show planned, and I created a tokamak with a light. It was really providing my insanity and convincing other people. But I have to be so thankful for Chloe and for the group that supported that vision, because it took a lot of risk to be able to talk about energy at that time, and I'm really proud that we did it, because the awareness started to happen outside. We live in silo community, right? The fusion community, the science community has this information, but not the fashion community or other communities. So it's time to cross-pollinate information, to bring more hope, and we all know that bad news sell more eyeballs, so just try to push the good news.
Well, our non-scientist was the first one to mention the word tokamak. Just for those of you in the audience who aren't so familiar, that is one of the technologies, probably, I think it's fair to say, the most prevalent technology over the last decades, and so we appreciate your bringing in the technical terms. Let me turn to Humphrey Emrima, and I hope I pronounced that name properly. Thank you. Look, obviously, this discussion is about the future, and it's good to hear, therefore, voices from the future. Humphrey is the chairman of the Youth Survival Organization, which probably gives a little hint in terms of how you're approaching this. And so could you, again, talk about that perspective in terms of the future, but also maybe talk about specifically about how you see fusion developments perhaps fitting into Africa, perhaps into Tanzania specifically, because frankly that's not usually top of discussion, and I think it would be very interesting to hear your perspective on that.
Thank you so much. I'm so privileged to see that Youth Voices are also on board in this panel. If I put on the shoes of any African leader now, and you approach me to tell me about fusion, I will say no. Why? I will say because it's hard to start and it's difficult to maintain. This might be true to our context as Africans because of the current financial architecture that we are having. Statistics shows us that from only 60 banks, they have invested more than $5.5 trillion to fossil fuel since the adoption of Paris Agreement. I would ask why. If we are serious about climate action, if we are serious about cutting down emissions and stopping development of new fossil fuel projects, why the financial portfolio for fossil fuel is escalating day by day? While by 2023 this year, the financial portfolio for renewables, it's only like $1.2 billion. The question is why? We are speaking about fusion, very good discussion. We are speaking about inclusive. But when you come to Africa, we will say no. We will say no because until this point of time, just transition to Africa is unrealistic. I come from Tanzania. A normal business day for a person who has a grocery. He works in the morning, goes to his grocery shop. He finds no electricity because of power rationing. He decides to purchase a power generator which uses diesel just as a backup electricity, because his grocery, all the products will perish if they are not in a cool temperature. That is fossil fuel. A client calls, says, I want this amount of vegetables to my home. He decides to use a motorbike to deliver the grocery. The motorbike uses fossil fuel. When you come to him and say, we need electric motorbikes, we need electric cars, it is something which is impossible. The best way to solve this is revitalization of the financial architecture. If we know that more than 70% of the emissions are coming from energy, and a lot of money have been invested in the fossil fuel energy, then we have to change the strategy. We have to change the investment and channel it to the renewables. This is the solution. And something which we are failing the planet, we are failing the current and the future generation, is that we have good ideas. We have the best ideas. We are speaking about fusion energy, of which, for example, in my country, Tanzania, currently, our country has a demand of only 1,800 megawatts. And we are in deficiency. We are producing only 1,400. We are speaking about industrialized economy. We are speaking about green economy. But this is unrealistic because we don't have resources. Why? Resources are there, but are channeled in the wrong direction. We are going too fast, but I think in the wrong direction. The best way to speak to Africans, to speak to Tanzanians, to speak to the global south about fusion energy is three things, which have been highlighted in the Paris Agreement. We need technology, we need capacity building, and we need financial resources. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important perspective indeed. I was now planning a lightning round of questions, but I'm told we have to make a lightning exit. So it's too bad because I had some good questions from it. But let me just then conclude by saying that we hope, obviously this was not a panel to discuss the technology directions, but what you can see is the incredible optimism and the incredible importance attached to the kind of breakthrough game changer that could be very, very much closer than is generally acknowledged. So I think we should come back at a future COP, maybe in a few years, hear the announcement of the breakthrough on fusion, and really get much more aggressively on our path to deep decarbonization. So thank you all. Thanks to the panel. Terrific. And we could go on, but thank you.